The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Rico, Colorado, as Abigail Osborne staggered toward the general store, one hand pressed against her swollen jaw. The year was 1879, and for the third time that month, her stepfather had silenced her with his fists for speaking her mind about how he ran the family ranch. This time, she had questioned his decision to sell their breeding stock at rock-bottom prices to the bank's owner, the same man who held their mortgage, and seemed determined to take everything they had. "You need to learn your place, girl," he'd snarled as his hand connected with her face. No man wants a woman who can't hold her tongue. But 21-year-old Abigail had never been one to stay silent, no matter the consequences. Even as tears of pain streamed down her face, she'd looked him in the eye. "Then I suppose I'll never have a man, for I cannot be someone I am not." Now, as she pushed open the door to Walsh's general store, the small bell announced her arrival. Mrs. Walsh looked up from her ledger, her face falling at the sight of Abigail's bruised cheek. "Oh, Abby," the older woman sighed. Again, Abigail straightened her shoulders. "Just need some supplies, Mrs. Walsh. Pa sent me for tobacco and nails." The lie came easily. She hadn't been sent for anything. She'd fled, needing somewhere to go before her mouth got her in worse trouble. The store was empty except for a tall stranger examining ammunition at the far counter. He wore the dust of the trail, his clothes weathered but well kept, a gun belt slung low on his hips. Something about the quiet confidence in his stance caught Abigail's attention. "Ain't seen you before," she said boldly, ignoring Mrs. Walsh's warning glance. Ladies weren't supposed to address unknown gentlemen, but Abigail had never been good at following such rules. The man turned, and Abigail felt her breath catch. His face was handsome beneath several days' worth of dark beard, but it was his eyes that held her blue as a summer sky and crinkled at the corners, as if he smiled often. "Isaac Xavier," he said, tipping his hat, "just rode in." His gaze lingered on her bruised face, but unlike most men who would awkwardly look away, he met her eyes directly. "Trouble follows you, miss. Trouble is what they call a woman with opinions around here," Abigail replied, lifting her chin despite the pain it caused. To her surprise, instead of looking affronted at her frankness, a genuine smile spread across his face. "Is that so? Well, I've always thought the most interesting people are the ones with something to say." Mrs. Walsh cleared her throat. "Mr. Xavier is our new cattle buyer, Abby. He's taken over the old Hanson place outside of town." Abigail felt a flush rise to her cheeks. The Hanson ranch bordered her stepfather's property. "Then I reckon we'll be neighbors, Mr. Xavier." "Isaac," he corrected. "And you are Abigail Osborne. Though most call me that Osborne girl with the troublesome mouth." She extended her hand, another impropriety that made Mrs. Walsh tut softly. Isaac took her hand without hesitation. His palm was rough with calluses, but his grip gentle. "Miss Osborne, I look forward to hearing what that troublesome mouth has to say." Something warm unfurled in Abigail's chest, something she'd never felt before. Here was a man who didn't flinch at her directness, who seemed to welcome it, even. "Might be sooner than you think," she replied. "Pa, my stepfather is selling off stock. If you're buying, you should know our best breeding bulls are worth twice what he'll ask." Isaac's eyebrows rose. "Is that right, Abby?" Mrs. Walsh warned. "Your stepfather's business is his own." "Not when he's drinking away our future," Abigail retorted. "Not when my mother's legacy is being sold for pennies." Instead of looking scandalized, Isaac nodded thoughtfully. "I appreciate honest business information, Miss Osborne. Perhaps you'd care to tell me more about the local herds sometime." Before Abigail could respond, the door burst open. Her stepfather, Jeremiah Osborne, filled the doorway, his face mottled with rage. "There you are, you ungrateful girl," he growled. "Thought you'd run off again, did you?" Fear closed Abigail's throat, but she refused to cower. "Just getting your tobacco, Pa." Jeremiah's gaze darted from her to Isaac, narrowing suspiciously. "Who's this?" Isaac stepped forward, his stance casual but somehow placing himself between Abigail and her stepfather. "Isaac Xavier, sir, new owner of the Hanson place. I was just introducing myself to your daughter." "Stepdaughter," Jeremiah corrected with a sneer. "And she needs to get on home. Got chores waiting." He grabbed Abigail's arm roughly. Isaac didn't move, but something in his eyes hardened. Miss Osborne was kindly filling me in on local cattle bloodlines. As I'll be buying stock, her knowledge is valuable. Jeremiah's grip loosened slightly as greed overtook anger. Buying, you say? Well, I've got the finest herd this side of the Colorado, better than anything Hanson had. So I hear, Isaac replied smoothly. In fact, I was about to invite you both to dinner tomorrow, to discuss business. Abigail stared at Isaac in surprise, but he continued without missing a beat. My housekeeper makes a fine stew, and I'd appreciate learning more about your operation, Mr. Osborne, from both of you. Jeremiah's expression wavered between suspicion and opportunity. Finally, the prospect of a sale won out. 6 o'clock, perfect, Isaac agreed. As her stepfather turned to pay for his tobacco, Abigail caught Isaac's eye. Why did you do that? She whispered. His smile was slight but genuine. Because I'd like to hear more of what you have to say, Miss Osborne. Every word of it. Something stirred in Abigail's heart, something dangerous and hopeful and fragile as a butterfly's wing. For the first time in years, someone wanted to listen. The next evening found Abigail in her best dress, a faded blue calico that had belonged to her mother. She'd pinned her auburn hair carefully and covered her fading bruise with powder borrowed from Mrs. Walsh. Her stepfather had been almost pleasant all day, excited by the prospect of selling cattle to the newcomer. Remember to keep quiet unless spoken to, Jeremiah warned as their wagon approached the Hanson now Xavier ranch. Business is men's affairs. Abigail bit her tongue, tasting blood. Yes, Pa. The Hanson place had fallen into disrepair after old man Hanson died, but already Abigail could see improvements. The broken fence posts had been replaced, the yard swept clean, and light glowed welcomingly from the windows of the modest two-story house. Isaac greeted them on the porch, looking transformed from the trail-worn cowboy of yesterday. He'd shaved his beard to reveal a strong jawline, and his clean shirt and vest gave him the appearance of a gentleman, though his sun-darkened skin and the calluses on his hands betrayed his true profession. "Welcome," he said, his eyes lingering on Abigail before turning to her stepfather. "Mr. Osborne, Miss Osborne, please come in." The interior of the house was simple but comfortable, with well-worn furniture and the appetizing smell of beef stew filling the air. A middle-aged woman with a kind face introduced herself as Mrs. Buchanan, the housekeeper Isaac had brought from Texas. "Dinner's nearly ready, Mr. Xavier," she said, disappearing back into the kitchen. Isaac showed them to the sitting room. "Can I offer you a drink, Mr. Osborne? I have a fine whiskey that made the journey with me." "Don't mind if I do," Jeremiah said, settling into an armchair. "Miss Osborne, perhaps some lemonade?" "Thank you," Abigail replied, surprised at the consideration. Most men would have ignored her until dinner was served. As Isaac poured the drinks, he casually asked, "How long have you been ranching in Rico, Mr. Osborne?" "Going on 15 years, Jeremiah said proudly. "Came out after the war, married Abigail's mother. She was a widow with the girl and this fine piece of land. Been building the herd ever since." The familiar way her stepfather claimed credit for her mother's ranch made Abigail's blood boil, but she sipped her lemonade silently. Her mother had inherited the ranch from her first husband, Abigail's father, who died when she was just 3. Everything they had came through her mother's lineage, not Jeremiah's opportunistic marriage. "And you, Miss Osborne, were you born here?" Isaac asked, including her in the conversation. Before she could answer, Jeremiah cut in. "Girl doesn't know much about ranching. Takes after her mother, more interested in books than beeves." "Is that so?" Isaac directed his question to Abigail, clearly expecting her to speak for herself. "I was born in this valley," she said carefully, mindful of her stepfather's warning glare. "And while I do enjoy reading, I've worked the ranch since I was old enough to sit a horse. I keep the breeding records and track the bloodlines." She couldn't help adding, "My mother taught me that good record keeping is as important as good grazing." Isaac nodded thoughtfully. She was right. "The best ranchers I know are as meticulous with their books as they are with their herds." He turned to Jeremiah. "You're fortunate to have someone with such skills in the family." Jeremiah grunted noncommittally, but Abigail felt a small thrill at the acknowledgement. During dinner, Isaac skillfully guided the conversation, asking Jeremiah about his cattle while finding ways to include Abigail. Each time she spoke, she expected her stepfather to silence her, but Isaac's obvious interest in her responses seemed to keep Jeremiah's temper in check. "So you've been crossbreeding Herefords with your Longhorns?" Isaac asked, responding to something Abigail had mentioned. "Been trying," Jeremiah said, "but it's expensive business bringing in good bulls." "We had a promising start," Abigail added, emboldened by Isaac's attentiveness. "The calves from last spring show excellent weight gain compared to our pure Longhorns. I've been tracking their growth in the ledger." Isaac's eyes lit with genuine interest. "I'd love to see those records sometime. I've been considering similar breeding experiments." "She can bring them next time you come to look at the stock," Jeremiah said, surprisingly accommodating after 3 glasses of whiskey. "When were you thinking of riding over? How about the day after tomorrow?" Isaac suggested. "I'd like to see your operation in full daylight." As they prepared to leave, Isaac helped Abigail into the wagon while her stepfather hitched up the horses. "Thank you for speaking up tonight," he said quietly. "Your knowledge is impressive." Abigail blushed. "Most men don't care to hear a woman's thoughts on cattle." "Then most men are fools," Isaac replied simply. "I never understood why having different parts means we should value different thoughts." The directness of his statement startled a laugh from her. "Mr. Xavier, that's hardly proper conversation." His eyes crinkled. "Neither is discussing cattle breeding at the dinner table, according to my mother. Yet here we are." Jeremiah climbed onto the wagon seat, ending their conversation, but Abigail felt the warmth of Isaac's words all the way home. 2 days later, Isaac arrived at the Osborne ranch shortly after breakfast. Abigail had been up since dawn, making sure the cattle were gathered in the nearest pastures and that her breeding ledgers were in order. She'd also taken extra care with her appearance, wearing her second-best dress, a practical brown skirt and white blouse that was easier to move in than her blue calico. Jeremiah met Isaac in the yard, all business now that a sale was potentially at hand. "We'll ride out to the south pasture first." "Got my best bulls there." Isaac nodded, but his eyes found Abigail on the porch. "Will Miss Osborne be joining us? I was hoping to see those records she mentioned." Jeremiah frowned. "Girls got housework to tend to." "Actually," Abigail interjected, stepping forward with her ledger clutched to her chest, "I've finished my morning chores and I have the breeding information right here." She held up the book. "I could explain our system while you look at the cattle." She held her breath, expecting a refusal, but Isaac spoke before her stepfather could. "Excellent. 3 sets of eyes are better than 2 when evaluating stock." He turned to Jeremiah. "If that's agreeable to you, sir." Put on the spot, Jeremiah could hardly refuse without appearing rude to a potential buyer. "Fine," he growled. "But saddle your own horse, girl. Already done," Abigail replied, unable to keep the satisfaction from her voice. She'd anticipated this possibility and had her bay mare ready behind the barn. As they rode toward the south pasture, Abigail positioned herself beside Isaac, with Jeremiah leading the way. The late summer sun beat down on them, but a pleasant breeze made the day bearable. "Your place is well situated," Isaac observed. "Good water access and plenty of shelter for winter." "My mother chose it," Abigail said quietly. "She came west with her first husband, my father, in '58. When he died, she kept it going alone until she met Jeremiah." Isaac nodded thoughtfully. "A strong woman. The strongest," Abigail agreed. "She taught me everything I know about ranching, doctoring cattle, and—" She hesitated, then finished softly, speaking my mind. "She passed on, I take it." Abigail nodded, the familiar ache rising in her chest. 5 years ago, fever took her." "I'm sorry," Isaac said, and the simple sincerity in his voice touched her. "What about your family?" she asked, changing the subject. "What brings a Texas cattleman to Colorado?" A shadow crossed his face. "Change of scenery, mainly. Texas got complicated after my brother died in a range war last year. Too many memories." Abigail's heart constricted at the pain in his voice. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you," he said softly. Then, with a small smile, "My mother would like you. She's outspoken, too terrified all my father's ranch hands with her forthright ways." "She sounds wonderful," Abigail laughed. Is she still in Texas? No, she and my father moved to California after William died. They have a small place near San Francisco now. His expression grew distant. I should have gone with them, perhaps, but ranching is all I know. Before Abigail could respond, they crested a hill and came into view of the south pasture where several dozen cattle grazed. Among them were 3 impressive bulls, 1 pure Hereford and 2 crossbreeds. Jeremiah pointed proudly. There they are, finest breeding stock in the county. Isaac studied the animals with a practiced eye. Good conformation on that red bull. That's Thunder, Abigail said, flipping open her ledger. He's one of our first crossbred successes. His calves show a 15% weight increase over pure Longhorn offspring. She turned the book toward Isaac, showing him the meticulous records she'd kept. Isaac looked impressed. You're thorough, Miss Osborne. Most ranchers I know couldn't tell you the exact percentages. Most ranchers can't read, Jeremiah muttered. Abigail ignored him. The white-faced one is our pure Hereford. Cost a small fortune to bring him in from Kansas, but he's been worth every penny. For the next hour, they rode among the cattle, with Abigail explaining their breeding program and Isaac asking thoughtful questions. Jeremiah, realizing that Isaac valued Abigail's knowledge, allowed her to speak freely, though his expression grew increasingly sour. When they returned to examine the younger stock, Isaac dismounted to inspect a particularly promising yearling. Jeremiah took the opportunity to pull his horse alongside Abigail's. You're making a fool of yourself, he hissed, chattering on like you own the place. I'm helping make a sale, Abigail retorted quietly. He's interested in our breeding program. He's humoring you because he wants my bulls, Jeremiah sneered. No real cattleman takes stock in a woman's opinions. The familiar words stung, but Abigail lifted her chin. Then why is he asking me all the questions while you just sit there scowling? Jeremiah's face darkened dangerously. You'll pay for that mouth when he's gone, girl. The threat chilled her, but before she could respond, Isaac returned to his horse. If he'd overheard their exchange, he gave no sign of it. Your stock is impressive, he told Jeremiah. I'd like to buy that crossbred bull and perhaps 10 of your best heifers to start my herd. Jeremiah's mood instantly improved. Excellent choice. Shall we discuss price back at the house? As the men negotiated over coffee in the kitchen, Abigail busied herself preparing lunch, her mind racing. Isaac Xavier was unlike any man she'd ever met. He listened to her as if her words had value. He looked at her without leering or dismissing. And more than once, she'd caught him watching her with something like admiration in his eyes. It was dangerous to hope, she knew. Men like Isaac didn't court women like her outspoken ranch girls with bruised faces and stubborn tongues. Even if he was different, he was just passing through their lives, buying cattle before moving on to build his own empire. Miss Osborne, she turned to find Isaac standing in the kitchen doorway, his expression unreadable. Your stepfather and I have concluded our business, he said. I'll be sending my foreman over tomorrow to collect the cattle. Oh, Abigail couldn't keep the disappointment from her voice. That's good. Isaac stepped closer, lowering his voice. I was hoping you might consider riding over to my place sometime. I could use your advice on setting up my own breeding records. Hope fluttered in her chest, but caution tempered it. My stepfather wouldn't approve. Perhaps you could come with Mrs. Walsh from town. I understand she visits outlying ranches to deliver special orders. The suggestion, so practical, yet clearly designed to give her a respectable reason to see him, warmed Abigail through. She does make deliveries on Tuesdays. Then I shall place a special order for this Tuesday, Isaac said with a small smile. Some items that simply cannot be entrusted to my ranch hands. Jeremiah's heavy footsteps in the hall ended their conversation, but Isaac's parting look carried a promise that made Abigail's heart race. That evening, as she served dinner, Jeremiah was in high spirits from the profitable sale. Xavier paid top dollar, he boasted, pouring himself another whiskey. Fool doesn't know I'd have taken half what he offered. Abigail set down the pot of stew with more force than necessary. He's not a fool. He knows exactly what those cattle are worth. Jeremiah's good mood evaporated. There you go again, thinking you know better than men who have been in this business their whole lives. Mother taught me to value what's ours properly. Abigail shot back. Just because you're eager to sell off pieces of her legacy doesn't mean everyone should cheat us. The blow came so fast she didn't see it coming. Jeremiah's hand connected with her cheek, sending her staggering against the table. "I've had enough of your back talk," he snarled. "Your mother spoiled you, filled your head with nonsense about women having opinions. No wonder no man in town will court you." Abigail straightened, her cheek burning but her voice steady. "I'd rather be alone forever than with a man who wants me silent." "Then alone you'll be," Jeremiah sneered. "Or did you think that fancy Texas cattleman was sweet on you?" He was being polite, girl. Men like him don't marry mouthy ranch brats. The words cut deep because they echoed her own doubts. But instead of cowering, Abigail gathered the remains of her dignity and walked out of the kitchen, ignoring Jeremiah's shouts to return. In her small bedroom, she pressed a cool cloth to her throbbing cheek and made a decision. She couldn't live like this anymore, walking on eggshells, hiding her thoughts, paying in blood and bruises for the crime of speaking her mind. Her mother wouldn't have wanted this for her. Tuesday couldn't come soon enough. When Tuesday arrived, Abigail rose before dawn to finish her chores early. By the time Mrs. Walsh's wagon appeared on the road, she was waiting by the gate, a small basket in hand. "Morning, Abby," Mrs. Walsh called. "Ready for our deliveries?" "Yes, madam," Abigail replied, climbing up beside the older woman. She'd told her stepfather she was helping Mrs. Walsh with store inventory, not a complete lie, as they would stop at several ranches to take orders for the general store, Mrs. Walsh glanced at Abigail's face, where the latest bruise had faded to a yellowish shadow. "Things any better at home?" Abigail shook her head. "Worse, if anything. He's drinking more since Ma died." "You could leave, you know," Mrs. Walsh said gently. "You're of age. The ranch might be his by marriage, but you could make your own way." "And go where? Do what?" Abigail sighed. "I'm not trained for anything but ranching." Mrs. Walsh patted her hand. "Sometimes opportunities appear when we least expect them." There was something knowing in her tone that made Abigail wonder if Isaac had confided in her. Their first stops were uneventful: the Peterson place, where Mrs. Peterson ordered fabric for new curtains, and the Miller Ranch, where they needed medicines for a sick child. By mid-morning, they were approaching the Xavier Ranch. "Mr. Xavier placed quite a specific order," Mrs. Walsh commented as they turned down his lane. "Wanted me to bring fabric samples, preserve jars, and ledger books. Said he's setting up his household proper-like." Abigail's heart quickened. "He seems very organized, Mrs. Walsh hummed noncommittally. "He also asked particularly if you'd be accompanying me, said something about cattle records." Heat rushed to Abigail's face. He values my opinion on breeding stock." "I'm sure that's all it is, Mrs. Walsh replied, but her smile suggested she believed otherwise. Isaac greeted them in the yard, looking pleased to see them both but with his eyes lingering on Abigail. He helped them down from the wagon with courteous care. "Mrs. Walsh, Miss Osborne, thank you for coming. Mrs. Buchanan has coffee ready inside." The housekeeper had indeed prepared coffee and fresh baked scones, serving them in the comfortable sitting room. After discussing Mrs. Walsh's deliveries, Isaac turned to Abigail. "I was hoping you might help me organize my breeding records, Miss Osborne. I've set up an office of sorts, but I'm afraid it's quite disorganized." "I'd be happy to," Abigail replied, ignoring Mrs. Walsh's knowing smile. "Excellent. Mrs. Walsh, would you mind if I borrowed Miss Osborne for a short while? I promise to return her before you need to continue your rounds." The older woman waved her hand. "Take your time. Mrs. Buchanan has promised to show me her jam-making secrets, and that could take an hour at least." Isaac led Abigail to a small room off the main hall that had been converted into an office. A desk sat near the window, covered with papers and ledgers. "I apologize for the mess," he said, closing the door partway enough for propriety but allowing them some privacy. "I've been trying to organize my records the way you showed me, but I'm afraid I lack your methodical mind." Abigail moved to the desk, examining the scattered notes. "It's not so bad, you just need a system." She picked up one of the ledgers. "This is actually quite similar to how my mother taught me to track bloodlines. Your mother sounds like she was a remarkable woman." "She was," Abigail said softly. She believed a woman should speak her mind even when it wasn't convenient for others to hear. Isaac stepped closer, his expression serious. The mark on your face, it's faded, but I can still see it. Does your stepfather do that often? Abigail stiffened, instinctively raising a hand to her cheek. It's not. Please, Isaac said gently, don't make excuses for him. I've seen enough to guess the truth. Something in his quiet certainty broke through her defenses. Yes, she admitted. When I speak out of turn or question his decisions, he says I'm too outspoken for a woman. There's no such thing as too outspoken, Isaac said firmly. My mother taught me that strength of character isn't determined by gender. Your mother sounds remarkable too, she is. He smiled slightly. She'd like you very much, Abigail. The use of her first name sent a shiver through her. Mr. Xavier, Isaac, he corrected. Please? Isaac, she said, testing the sound. Why did you really ask me here today? He took a deep breath. Because from the moment I saw you in the general store, standing tall despite your bruises, speaking your mind despite the consequences, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. Abigail's heart hammered against her ribs. You barely know me. I know enough, he said simply. I know you're intelligent, observant, and brave. I know you care deeply about the land and the legacy your mother left you. And I know that every word you say makes me want to hear 1,000 more. People will talk, she whispered. They already think I'm unsuitable. Let them talk. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Abigail, I don't want to pressure you or rush you, but I want you to know that there are men in this world who value a woman's voice, who treasure it, even. Their eyes held for a long moment, and Abigail felt something shift inside her, a wall crumbling, a possibility opening. I should look at those records, she said finally, turning back to the desk. But her voice was softer, and when Isaac's hand brushed hers as he handed her a pencil, she didn't pull away. For the next several weeks, Abigail found reasons to visit the Xavier ranch. Sometimes she accompanied Mrs. Walsh on deliveries. Other times, she rode over alone, telling her stepfather she was checking on the cattle Isaac had purchased. Jeremiah, pleased with the sale and the possibility of future business, didn't question her too closely. Each visit deepened her connection with Isaac. They rode the boundaries of his property together, discussing his plans for improvements. He showed her the areas where he wanted to experiment with new grasses for better grazing. They talked of books they'd read, dreams they harbored, and the people who had shaped them. Abigail found herself speaking more freely than she ever had before, and Isaac listened as if every word was precious. When she described her mother's vision for the ranch, he didn't dismiss it as fanciful. When she explained her ideas for cattle breeding, he asked thoughtful questions that showed he valued her knowledge. One crisp October afternoon, they sat beneath a cottonwood tree near the creek that divided their properties, sharing a simple lunch Mrs. Buchanan had packed. The leaves were turning gold above them, occasionally drifting down to land in Abigail's hair or on Isaac's shoulders. Winter will be here soon, Isaac observed, watching a V of geese heading south. The old-timers say it'll be a harsh one, Abigail replied. The squirrels have been gathering extra nuts, and the beaver lodges along the creek are built up high. Isaac smiled. You notice everything, don't you? My mother taught me to read the land, she said. She said nature speaks to us if we're willing to listen. Like you, he said softly. Speaking truths if people are willing to listen. Abigail looked down, uncomfortable with the admiration in his eyes. Most aren't? I am. Isaac reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Abigail, I need to ask you something. Her heart skipped. Yes, your stepfather. Has he hurt you again since I came to town? The question wasn't what she'd expected. Abigail hesitated, then nodded slowly. Not as often. He's been in a better mood since your purchase. Isaac's jaw tightened, but he has, last week, she admitted. I suggested we replace some fence posts before winter, and he didn't appreciate my planning his work for him. This can't continue, Isaac said, his voice low and intense. You deserve better. There's no better for me, Abigail replied. The ranch is my home, my inheritance from my mother. I can't abandon it to him. What if there was another way? Isaac leaned forward. Abigail, I've grown to care for you deeply these past weeks, Every moment with you confirms what I suspected from our first meeting, that you're extraordinary. Abigail's breath caught. Isaac. I'm not asking for any commitment yet, he said quickly. It's too soon, and you've had no chance to consider other possibilities, but I want you to know that when you're ready, He paused, gathering his thoughts. I want to court you properly. Joy bloomed in Abigail's chest, but caution tempered it. My stepfather would never allow it. He sees me as unpaid labor, not as a woman with her own future. Then we'll find another way, Isaac said firmly, but first I'd like to speak to the sheriff about your situation. Alarm replaced joy. No, you can't. Jeremiah is friends with Sheriff Collins. They drink together. No one would believe me over him. Then we need evidence, Isaac said, his expression hardening, and we need allies. What are you suggesting? I'm not sure yet, he admitted. But I know I can't stand by while he hurts you. He took her hand. Will you trust me to help you? Abigail looked at their joined hands, her smaller one enveloped in his strong, sun-darkened grip. I've never trusted anyone since my mother died, she whispered. But I think I could trust you. Isaac's smile was like sunrise. That's all I ask for now. Later that evening, as Abigail prepared dinner, she found herself humming softly something she hadn't done in years. The simple joy of being understood, of being valued, had lightened her heart in ways she couldn't have imagined. Her happiness was short-lived. Jeremiah burst through the door in a foul mood, reeking of whiskey. Where were you today? He demanded. Went to the south pasture and you weren't there. I told you I was checking on the cattle at Xavier's ranch, Abigail replied, keeping her voice steady. For 6 hours, Jeremiah sneered. Think I'm stupid, girl? You're sweet on that Texan. Abigail concentrated on stirring the stew. I'm helping him set up his breeding records. He values my knowledge. Your knowledge, Jeremiah mimicked cruelly. Is that what they're calling it these days? You spreading your legs for him too? The crude accusation made Abigail's cheeks flame. He's a gentleman, she snapped. Unlike some men I could name. The blow came without warning, knocking her against the stove. The pot of stew tipped, spilling hot liquid across the floor and splattering her skirt. Don't you dare speak to me that way, Jeremiah roared. This is my house, my ranch, and you'll show some respect. Fury and pain surged through Abigail. It was never yours. This was my father's land, then my mother's. You're just the drunk she made the mistake of marrying. Jeremiah's face contorted with rage. He grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her violently. Your precious mother was a fool who couldn't keep this place running without a man. Just like you're a fool if you think that Texan wants anything but a quick tumble with the local trash. Something inside Abigail snapped. 5 years of swallowed words, of bruises hidden beneath high collars, of watching her mother's legacy crumble under this man's neglect, erupted in a single moment of defiance. She wrenched away from him and grabbed the iron poker from beside the stove. Don't touch me again, she said, her voice shaking but determined. Ever, Jeremiah laughed, an ugly sound. Or what? You'll hit me with that. You haven't got the spine. Try me, Abigail replied, raising the poker higher. I'm through being your punching bag. For a moment, Jeremiah seemed taken aback by her resistance. Then his eyes narrowed. Put that down and clean up this mess. No, the single word felt like freedom. No, he echoed incredulously. You ungrateful little, he lunged forward, but Abigail was ready. She swung the poker, not to strike him but to ward him off. It connected with his outstretched arm and he howled in pain. You crazy bitch, he snarled, clutching his arm. I'll teach you to raise a hand to me, he charged again, and this time Abigail couldn't move quickly enough. He knocked the poker from her grasp and grabbed her by the throat, slamming her against the wall. Black spots danced before her eyes as his fingers tightened. Should have done this years ago, Jeremiah growled. Should have shown you your place the day your mother died. Abigail clawed at his hands, fighting for breath. As darkness began closing in, she heard the front door crash open, and suddenly the pressure on her throat was gone. She slid down the wall, gasping for air. Through watering eyes, she saw Isaac grappling with Jeremiah, driving him back from her with powerful blows. Touch her again and I'll kill you, Isaac snarled, landing a punch that sent Jeremiah staggering. This ain't your business, Xavier, Jeremiah slurred, blood trickling from his split lip. She's my kin under my roof. She's not your property, Isaac retorted, and any man who beats a woman is my business." He turned to Abigail, his eyes filled with concern. "Can you stand?" She nodded shakily, and he helped her to her feet, keeping himself between her and Jeremiah. "Get your things," he said quietly. "You're not staying here tonight." "Where do you think she's going?" Jeremiah demanded, struggling to his feet. "She has no place but here. She has choices," Isaac replied coldly. "Something you've tried to deny her." Abigail moved carefully to the stairs, her throat burning with each breath. She gathered a few essential items, a change of clothes, her mother's locket, the family Bible, and her breeding ledgers, and returned to find Isaac and Jeremiah in a tense standoff. "This isn't over," Jeremiah warned as Isaac guided Abigail toward the door. "She's got no claim to anything here without me. She leaves now, she leaves with nothing." Isaac paused, his hand protective on Abigail's back. "She leaves with her dignity intact," he said. "Which is more than you'll have when the town hears how you treat women." Outside, Isaac's horse waited beside a small wagon. "Mrs. Buchanan sent me with some preserves for your pantry," he explained. "I was nearly here when I heard the commotion." "Thank you," Abigail whispered, her voice hoarse from Jeremiah's assault. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't arrived." Isaac's expression darkened. "I have some idea." He helped her into the wagon. "I'm taking you to Mrs. Walsh. You'll be safe there tonight." As they drove away, Abigail looked back at the only home she'd ever known. Despite everything, leaving felt like abandoning her mother's memory. "I can't stay away forever," she said finally. "The ranch is legally half yours," Isaac finished. "Mrs. Walsh told me. Your mother's will divide it between you and Jeremiah, though he's been acting as sole owner." Abigail's eyes widened. "What? I never knew. He told me everything went to him." "He lied," Isaac said simply. "The will is registered with the county clerk. Tomorrow we'll speak to Judge Wilson about enforcing your rights." Hope and fear battled in Abigail's heart. "Jeremiah won't give up easily." "Neither will we," Isaac promised, taking her hand. "Neither will we, Mrs." Walsh took one look at Abigail's bruised throat and ushered her inside without questions. She prepared a poultice of herbs for the bruises and made up the spare bedroom with fresh linens. "You should have come to me sooner," she chided gently as she helped Abigail prepare for bed. "I couldn't leave the ranch," Abigail explained. "It's all I have of my parents. And now I know it's partly mine by right," she said with quiet determination. "And I won't let him destroy what my mother built." Mrs. Walsh patted her hand. "That young man of yours seems ready to move mountains to help you." "He's not my young man," Abigail protested, but the words lacked conviction. "Not yet, perhaps," Mrs. Walsh replied with a knowing smile. "But I've seen how he looks at you, Abby, like you hang the moon and stars." Sleep came fitfully that night, with dreams of Jeremiah's hands at her throat interspersed with memories of Isaac's gentle touch. By morning, Abigail's resolve had hardened. She would fight for her inheritance, not just for herself but for her mother's memory. Judge Wilson received them in his office behind the courthouse. A stern man with bushy white whiskers and penetrating eyes, he listened impassively as Abigail explained her situation, with occasional supportive comments from Isaac. "I have the will right here," the judge said finally, pulling a document from a filing cabinet. "And Miss Osborne is correct." Catherine Osborne left the ranch equally divided between her husband and daughter, with the daughter's portion to be managed by the husband until she reached 21 years of age. "Which I did last spring," Abigail added. Judge Wilson nodded. "So noted. Mr. Osborne should have transferred half ownership to you at that time. Is there any legal way to force him to recognize my claim?" Abigail asked. "Certainly. I can issue a court order establishing your rights." The judge frowned. "However, proving mismanagement or improper guardianship is another matter, unless you have witnesses to the abuse." Abigail touched her throat, where the bruises were still visible. "Just these." The judge's expression softened slightly. "Those are compelling, Miss Osborne, but without corroboration." "Mrs. Walsh saw her condition last night," Isaac interjected, "and I witnessed Osborne attacking her." "That helps," Judge Wilson acknowledged. "But a stepfather might claim reasonable discipline, however archaic that notion might be. There's nothing reasonable about choking someone until they nearly lose consciousness." Isaac said tightly. The judge sighed. I don't disagree, Mr. Xavier, but the law moves slowly in these matters. He turned to Abigail. I can issue the ownership decree today. As for the rest, we would need to build a stronger case. What if he refuses to acknowledge the decree? Abigail asked. Then he would be in contempt of court, and I could authorize the sheriff to enforce it. Judge Wilson's eyes narrowed. However, if Sheriff Collins is as friendly with Osborne as you suggest, enforcement might be selective. Abigail's heart sank. Even with the law on her side, Jeremiah's local connections might protect him. There must be something we can do, Isaac insisted. Judge Wilson leaned back in his chair. Well, there is one option. He looked thoughtfully at Abigail. You could sell your half of the ranch. Sell it, Abigail echoed, dismayed. But it's my home, my heritage. Hear me out, the judge continued. By law, when property is held in common and one party wishes to sell, the other owner has first right of refusal. If Osborne doesn't have the funds to buy you out, and from what you've said about his drinking and mismanagement, he likely doesn't, then the property would be put up for public sale. Forcing a division or complete sale, Isaac concluded, understanding dawning on his face. Precisely, Judge Wilson agreed. Either way, Miss Osborne would receive half the value in cash. Abigail considered this. But then I'd have nothing but money, no home, no ranch. Money buys options, Isaac said quietly, including other ranches. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a promise, a possibility. I'll think about it, Abigail told the judge. For now, I'd like that ownership decree, please. Judge Wilson nodded. I'll have it drawn up immediately. Where can I find you when it's ready? She's staying with Mrs. Walsh, Isaac replied. For her safety, wise precaution, the judge agreed. I'll send my clerk over by this afternoon. As they left the courthouse, Abigail felt lighter than she had in years. Having the law acknowledge her rights validated everything she had suffered through. What will you do? Isaac asked as they walked toward the general store. I don't know yet, she admitted. Selling feels like giving up, but staying means fighting Jeremiah at every turn. Whatever you decide, I'll support you, Isaac promised. Abigail stopped, turning to face him. Why are you doing all this for me? Isaac's expression was open, vulnerable. Because from the moment I met you, I've been drawn to your spirit. Because every word you speak makes me want to know you better. Because when I look at you, I see someone I could build a life with. The simple honesty of his declaration stole Abigail's breath. Isaac, I'm not asking for anything now, he said quickly. You have enough decisions to make without adding my feelings to the mix, but I want you to know that whatever path you choose, I hope it's one where I can walk beside you. Abigail reached up, touching his cheek gently. I've never met anyone like you, someone who values my voice instead of trying to silence it. Your voice is the most beautiful sound I know, he said softly. Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of Sheriff Collins, his expression thunderous as he approached them. Miss Osborne, he said curtly. Your stepfather reported you missing this morning, says you ran off with some valuables from the ranch. Abigail's temper flared. The only valuables I took were my mother's locket and our family Bible, both of which belong to me. Be that as it may, he's mighty concerned, Collins continued, eyeing Isaac suspiciously, especially about you keeping company with strangers. Mr. Xavier saved me from a beating last night, Abigail retorted. And I'm 21 years old, Sheriff. I can keep company with whomever I choose. Collins' mustache twitched with annoyance. Your stepfather says differently. Judge Wilson might have something to say about that, Isaac interjected. We've just come from seeing him about Mrs. Osborne's will. The sheriff's expression changed subtly. Will, what will? The one that leaves half the ranch to me, Abigail said, satisfaction coloring her voice. The judge is issuing a decree confirming my ownership today. Collins looked taken aback. Jeremiah never mentioned any will. I imagine he wouldn't, Abigail replied dryly. It doesn't suit his narrative. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. Well, that changes things somewhat. He cleared his throat. Still, you should let your stepfather know you're safe. He's been drinking since morning, working himself into a state. I'll send him a message through Judge Wilson's clerk, Abigail said firmly. But I won't be returning home until my safety is guaranteed. Collins looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it. Suit yourself, he said finally. but don't blame me if Jeremiah takes exception to your arrangements." He glanced meaningfully at Isaac before tipping his hat and walking away. "He'll tell Jeremiah everything," Abigail said worriedly once the sheriff was out of earshot. "Good," Isaac replied. "Let Jeremiah know the law is on your side. Maybe it will make him think twice before causing more trouble." But Abigail knew her stepfather better than that. The news wouldn't deter him, it would enrage him. That evening, as Abigail helped Mrs. Walsh close the store, the older woman shared some town gossip. "Jeremiah's been at the saloon all day," she said, counting the day's receipts. "Telling anyone who'll listen that you've run off with that fancy Texan and stolen family heirlooms." Abigail sighed. "I'm not surprised. Most folks aren't believing him," Mrs. Walsh continued. "Your mother was well respected, and people remember how things changed after she passed. They've seen your bruises over the years, even if no one spoke up." "Why didn't they?" Abigail asked, the old hurt rising. "If they knew, why didn't anyone help?" Mrs. Walsh looked saddened. "Fear, mostly. Jeremiah has a mean reputation when crossed. And some old-fashioned notions about a man's right to discipline his household." She squeezed Abigail's hand. "I should have done more myself. I'm sorry for that." "You're helping now," Abigail said gently. "That counts for something." The bell over the door jingled, and they turned to see Judge Wilson's clerk, a nervous young man clutching an official-looking envelope. "Miss Osborne," he asked, "Judge Wilson sent these papers for you to sign. They establish your half-ownership of the Osborne Ranch and authorize you to access all financial records related to the property." As Abigail signed the documents, a strange sense of power flowed through her. For the first time in her adult life, she had legal standing the right to make decisions about her own future. "The judge also asked me to tell you that he sent a copy to Mr. Osborne by courier," the clerk added. "And he suggests you might want to visit the bank tomorrow to discuss the ranch accounts." After the clerk left, Abigail carefully folded the papers and put them in her pocket. "I should go to the ranch tomorrow to get more of my things," she said, "and to check on the cattle." "Not alone, Mrs. Walsh cautioned. "Jeremiah will be in a foul mood when he gets those papers." "Isaac offered to accompany me," Abigail admitted, "but I don't want to appear dependent on him. This is my fight." "There's a difference between dependence and alliance," Mrs. Walsh said wisely. "Your mother would have been the first to tell you that accepting help isn't weakness." Abigail pondered this as she prepared for bed. Her mother had indeed been strong running the ranch alone after her first husband died, making difficult decisions, speaking her mind to men who thought women should be silent. But she had also known when to accept support, forming alliances with neighboring ranchers and merchants in town. Perhaps true strength lay not in facing every battle alone, but in knowing when to stand with others. The next morning, Abigail was unsurprised to find Isaac waiting outside the general store, his horse saddled alongside a mount for her. "Mrs. Walsh sent word that you're planning to visit the ranch today," he explained. "I thought you might appreciate some company." Abigail smiled, touched by his consideration. "Thank you. I was actually going to ask if you'd come with me." His answering smile was like sunrise. "Then we're of one mind." As they rode toward the Osborne Ranch, Abigail outlined her plans. "I want to check the ledgers first, see exactly what shape the finances are in. Then I need to gather more of my belongings." "And if Jeremiah is there?" Isaac asked. "I'll handle him," Abigail said with more confidence than she felt. "The law is on my side now." "Laws are just words on paper until they're enforced," Isaac cautioned. "Be careful not to provoke him unnecessarily." Abigail shot him a sideways glance. "You're suggesting I hold my tongue." "Never," he replied with a smile. "I'm suggesting you choose your battles strategically. Your stepfather is already backed into a corner. Cornered animals are the most dangerous." When they reached the ranch, Jeremiah's horse was absent from the barn, a small mercy. Abigail moved quickly through the house, gathering clothes, books, and personal items while Isaac kept watch in her stepfather's office. She found the ranch ledgers stacked haphazardly on the desk. A quick review confirmed her worst fears. The accounts were in disarray, with large sums withdrawn for supplies that never appeared on the ranch and loans that were never recorded as repaid. He's been bleeding the place dry, she told Isaac, showing him the figures. At this rate, we'll be bankrupt by spring. All the more reason to consider selling your half, Isaac suggested gently. Abigail ran her hand over the leather-bound ledger, her mother's careful handwriting on the early pages giving way to Jeremiah's sloppy entries. I hate the thought of giving up, but staying tied to him means watching everything my parents built crumble away. It's not giving up to choose a different path, Isaac said. Sometimes the bravest thing is knowing when to let go. Before Abigail could respond, the sound of hoofbeats in the yard alerted them to Jeremiah's return. She quickly gathered the ledgers and added them to her bag. Time to go, Isaac said, moving toward the door, but they were too late. Jeremiah burst into the office, his face flushed with alcohol and rage. "Stealing my business records now, are you?" he snarled. "After all I've done for you." "These records belong to both of us," Abigail replied, forcing her voice to remain steady. "And what you've done for me is beat me, belittle me, and try to rob me of my inheritance." "Inheritance," Jeremiah spat. "Your mother would be ashamed of how you're behaving, running off with a man, turning against family." "My mother would be ashamed of how you've treated her daughter," Abigail countered, "and how you've neglected her ranch." Jeremiah took a threatening step forward, but Isaac moved between them. "Think carefully, Osborne," he warned. "Miss Osborne has legal standing now and witnesses to your previous assaults." Jeremiah's eyes narrowed. "You think you can just walk in here and take what's mine? This fancy Texan got you believing you're too good for the life your mother built." "No," Abigail replied firmly. "He's helped me see that I'm too good for the life you've forced on me, one of servitude and silence." "You ungrateful little..." "Careful," Isaac interrupted. "Every threat you make strengthens Miss Osborne's case against you." Jeremiah glared at them both, then abruptly changed tactics. "Fine. Take your papers and your things, but don't think this is over. Half ownership means nothing if you can't run a ranch, girl, and no man in these parts will do business with you over me." "We'll see about that," Abigail replied. "The bank manager might be interested in your creative accounting." Fear flashed across Jeremiah's face before he masked it with contempt. "You always did talk too much for your own good, just like your mother." "Yes," Abigail agreed, meeting his gaze steadily. "Just like my mother, who built this ranch while you've done nothing but tear it down." She shouldered past him, ledgers in hand, with Isaac close behind. Outside, they mounted their horses quickly, Abigail's heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She had stood her ground, spoken her truth, and walked away unharmed. The power of it was intoxicating. "You were magnificent," Isaac said quietly as they rode away. "I've never seen anything like it." Abigail laughed, the sound surprising even her. "I've been holding those words in for 5 years. They were worth waiting for," Isaac replied with a smile. "Every single one." Over the next few weeks, Abigail threw herself into understanding the ranch's financial situation. The news was grim. Years of Jeremiah's mismanagement had left the operation deeply in debt, with creditors beginning to circle. "The bank is threatening foreclosure if the winter tax payment isn't made," she told Isaac one evening as they sat in Mrs. Walsh's kitchen. "And there's no money to make it." "Could you sell some cattle?" he suggested. "We'd need to sell almost half the herd," Abigail sighed. "And in winter, prices are at their lowest. It would be throwing away value." Isaac was quiet for a moment. "I have another suggestion, but I don't want you to take it the wrong way." Abigail raised an eyebrow. "Now I'm intrigued." "I could buy your half of the ranch," he said carefully. "At full market value, you'd have the funds to settle the debts and still have a sizable amount left." Abigail stiffened. "I don't need charity, Isaac." "It's not charity," he insisted. "It's sound business. Your half of the Osborne ranch adjoins my property. Combined, they'd make an operation twice the size of either alone, more efficient, more profitable." "And what would happen to me in this arrangement?" Abigail asked, her voice cooler than she intended. "Would I become just another employee on what was once my family's land?" Isaac's expression softened. "That depends entirely on you, Abigail." "What do you mean?" He reached across the table, taking her hand. "I mean that my feelings for you have only grown stronger these past weeks. I've come to admire not just your courage and your mind, but your heart as well." He took a deep breath. In an ideal world, I'd court you properly for months before speaking of this, but circumstances being what they are. Abigail's heart raced. Isaac, what are you saying? I'm saying that I love you, he said simply. That I want to build a life with you as partners, equals. The ranch would be ours together, run by both of us with both our names on the deed. You're proposing marriage, Abigail said, her voice barely above a whisper. I am, Isaac confirmed, but not as a business arrangement. I'd want you as my wife even if you came with nothing but the clothes on your back. His grip on her hand tightened. I love your outspoken nature, your determination, your intelligence. I love that you never back down when you believe in something. I love that you see the world clearly and name what you see, no matter who it discomforts. Tears welled in Abigail's eyes. No one has ever loved those things about me before. Then no one has truly seen you, Isaac replied softly. Abigail took a shaky breath. I need time to think. This is all happening so quickly. Of course, Isaac said, releasing her hand. Take all the time you need. My offer, both of them, will remain open. That night, Abigail lay awake, her mind churning with possibilities. She had no doubt about her feelings for Isaac in the short time she'd known him. He had become essential to her happiness. His respect for her mind, his encouragement of her voice, his steadfast support in her darkest moments all had revealed a man unlike any she'd ever known. But marriage, so soon. What if it was just gratitude she felt, or the natural attraction of a young woman to the first man who had ever truly listened to her? And yet, when she imagined a future without Isaac by her side, her heart contracted painfully. The thought of him returning to Texas or moving on to California to join his parents left her feeling hollow and adrift. By morning, Abigail had made her decision. She found Isaac at his ranch, checking the stock in the barn. I've been thinking about your proposal, she said without preamble. Both of them. Isaac straightened, his expression cautiously hopeful. And I'll sell you my half of the ranch, Abigail began, watching his face fall slightly before she continued. But I won't marry you, not yet. Not yet, he echoed, confusion evident in his voice. Not yet, Abigail confirmed. I care for you deeply, Isaac. I might even love you, though I'm not sure I know what that feels like. She took a step closer. But I need to know who I am apart from the ranch, apart from Jeremiah's control. I need to stand on my own before I stand beside anyone else, even someone as wonderful as you. Understanding dawned in Isaac's eyes. You need time. Yes, she agreed. Time to discover myself. Time to be sure that what I feel for you isn't just gratitude or relief. She took his hands in hers. I want to court properly. I want to fall in love slowly, deliberately, with my eyes wide open. Isaac's smile was tender. I can wait, he said, for as long as it takes, even if it means living in town while you run the combined ranches alone. Even then, he assured her. Though I'd hoped you might consider staying on as my ranch manager paid position, completely professional. His eyes twinkled. At least during working hours. Abigail laughed. That's actually a perfect solution. I keep my connection to the land without the pressure of ownership, earn my own way, and we have time to know each other better. Then it's settled, Isaac said, raising her hand to his lips. I'll have the bank draw up the sale papers and Judge Wilson can oversee the transfer. What about Jeremiah? Abigail asked, her smile fading. He has first right of refusal on my half. True, Isaac acknowledged, but he'd need cash to exercise that right, cash we both know he doesn't have. 2 days later, they met at the bank with Judge Wilson, the bank manager, and a sullen Jeremiah. As predicted, when presented with the opportunity to buy Abigail's half, Jeremiah admitted he lacked the funds. Then the sale to Mr. Xavier will proceed, Judge Wilson declared. The proceeds will first satisfy the outstanding debts on the property, with the remainder going to Miss Osborne. This is highway robbery, Jeremiah muttered. The girl wouldn't have a claim at all if her mother hadn't been soft-hearted. The girl, Abigail said evenly, is a woman with full legal rights to her inheritance, rights you tried to deny her. She turned to the bank manager. I believe there are some discrepancies in the ranch accounts that should be addressed before finalizing the sale. The ensuing audit revealed extensive financial improprieties, loans Jeremiah had taken from the ranch accounts for gambling debts, phantom expenses, and missing cattle sales. By the time the accounting was complete, his share of the proceeds was substantially reduced. "You'll pay for this," he hissed to Abigail as they left the bank. "No one in this town will forget how you turned against your own family." "No," Abigail replied calmly. "They won't forget how I finally stood up for myself after years of abuse. They won't forget how you tried to steal my inheritance and silence my voice." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "And they won't forget that I won." Jeremiah's face contorted with rage, but with Judge Wilson and Isaac watching, he could only storm away, defeated. What will he do now? Isaac asked as they watched Jeremiah disappear into the saloon. "Drink away what's left of his money, most likely," Abigail replied without regret. "After that, who knows? There's always work for a man willing to labor, even one with his disposition." "And you?" Isaac asked, his voice softening. "What will you do with your newfound freedom?" Abigail smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. "First, I'm going to buy Mrs. Walsh a new delivery wagon to thank her for her kindness. Then I'm renting rooms above the millinery shop." Her eyes met his, warm with promise. "And then, Mr. Xavier, I believe you owe me a proper courtship." "Indeed I do," Isaac agreed, offering her his arm. "Starting with dinner at the hotel restaurant tonight. That sounds like an excellent beginning," Abigail replied, taking his arm, and it was just that, a beginning. Over the next several months, Isaac courted Abigail with patience and devotion. They attended church socials together, shared meals at the hotel, and rode out to check the cattle side by side. As ranch manager, Abigail flourished, applying her knowledge and vision without Jeremiah's constant interference. The hands who had once ignored her now sought her advice on breeding and grazing rotations. Under her guidance, the combined ranches began to thrive. In the evenings, she and Isaac would sit on his porch, discussing books, sharing dreams, and planning improvements to the ranch. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the valley in gold and crimson. Through it all, Isaac never tried to silence her or dismiss her ideas. He truly listened to every word she said, treasuring her thoughts as gifts freely given. By spring, Abigail had moved into a small cabin on the ranch property, close enough to work efficiently but separate enough to maintain her independence. The arrangement raised some eyebrows in town, but Judge Wilson's approval and Mrs. Walsh's vocal support quieted most of the gossip. Jeremiah had left Rico in February, heading to Denver with what remained of his money. Abigail felt neither joy nor sorrow at his departure, only a quiet relief that that chapter of her life was closed. On a perfect May morning, with wildflowers carpeting the meadows and new calves frolicking in the pastures, Isaac took Abigail riding to their favorite spot by the creek. The cottonwood was in full leaf now, providing dappled shade for the picnic he had packed. "I've been thinking," he said as they finished their meal, "about our arrangement." Abigail's heart skipped. "Oh, it's been 6 months since you agreed to sell your half of the ranch," Isaac continued. 6 months of working together, getting to know each other better." 6 wonderful months, Abigail agreed softly. "I promised I would wait as long as necessary," Isaac said, taking her hand, "and I meant it. I would wait years if that's what you needed." He paused, his blue eyes earnest. "But I find myself hoping that you might have reached some conclusions about us in that time." Abigail smiled, squeezing his hand. "I have, as a matter of fact. Would you care to share those conclusions?" Isaac asked, his voice light but his expression intense. "I've concluded," Abigail said slowly, savoring the moment, "that I love you, Isaac Xavier. Not out of gratitude or relief or any fleeting emotion, but deeply and completely for exactly who you are." Joy blazed across Isaac's face. "And who am I, according to your assessment?" "You're the man who saw me when I was invisible," Abigail replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Who valued my voice when others tried to silence it, who believed in me when I had stopped believing in myself." She reached up to touch his face. "You're the man I want to build a life with as partners, equals, and lovers." Isaac caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Does this mean you might consider a more permanent arrangement between us?" "It might," Abigail teased, "if properly asked." In one smooth motion, Isaac slid from the blanket to one knee, still holding her hand. "Abigail Osborne, you are the most remarkable woman I have ever known. Your courage, your intelligence, your unwavering honesty, everything about you fills me with wonder." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I fell in love with your voice first, with every outspoken, thoughtful, challenging word. Then I fell in love with your heart. Would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife, my partner in all things, for all our days?" He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond. Tears filled Abigail's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, with all my heart." As Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger, Abigail felt her mother's presence not as a ghost or spirit, but as a legacy of strength and determination that had carried her through the darkest times and led her, ultimately, to this moment of perfect joy. They were married in June in Judge Wilson's garden, with Mrs. Walsh standing as Abigail's witness and the judge's wife providing flowers from her renowned garden. The ceremony was small but joyful, with many of the townspeople gathering afterward for a celebration at the hotel. "Mrs. Xavier," Isaac murmured as they shared their first dance as husband and wife. "How does it sound?" "Wonderful," Abigail replied, smiling up at him. "But I hope you know you've married a woman who will never stop speaking her mind." "I would be terribly disappointed if you did," Isaac laughed. "Your outspoken nature is what I love best about you. And your willingness to listen is what I love best about you," Abigail countered, resting her head against his shoulder as they swayed to the music. That night, in the privacy of the master bedroom at the ranch house, their home, now Abigail discovered another way of speaking, another kind of honesty. In Isaac's gentle, passionate embrace, she found a new voice, one of sighs and whispers and wordless pleasure. And in the quiet afterward, as they lay tangled together in the moonlight, she knew she had finally found a man who valued every part of her mind, heart, and body. In the years that followed, the Xavier Ranch became one of the most successful operations in the region. Abigail's innovative breeding programs produced cattle that commanded premium prices, while Isaac's fair business practices earned them respect throughout the territory. Together, they built not just a profitable enterprise but a home filled with love, respect, and the sound of unfettered voices. Their first child, a son they named William after Isaac's fallen brother, arrived 10 months after their wedding, a sturdy boy with his mother's auburn hair and his father's blue eyes. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Catherine, named for Abigail's mother. Both children grew up knowing their opinions were valued, their voices welcome. On their 5th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Isaac presented Abigail with a leather-bound book. Inside, she found blank pages and a simple inscription: "For the words yet to come, may they always be spoken freely and heard with love." Abigail looked up at her husband, her heart full. "I never imagined I could be this happy," she said softly. "There were times when I thought I would spend my life being punished for speaking my truth. Instead, you found someone who loves hearing every word you say," Isaac replied, drawing her close. "Even when those words are challenging," Abigail teased. "Especially then," Isaac assured her. "Your challenging words have made me a better man, a better rancher, and a better husband than I ever could have been without them." As darkness fell over the valley they had made their own, Abigail reflected on the journey that had brought her here from a bruised and silenced girl to a woman whose voice rang clear and strong across the land she loved. It hadn't been easy, and the scars of those earlier years would never fully fade. But in finding the courage to speak, she had found her way home to herself, to love, and to a life where every word she uttered was heard, valued, and treasured by the man who had taught her that her voice was not a burden to be tolerated but a gift to be celebrated. And in the end, that was the greatest freedom of all.